morning everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I will be going through all the books I've read last winter. I didn't read that many books. I think I read 8 books because I was a bit in a reading slump. But then one of my goals this year is to more focus on the books that I'm actually reading and enjoying them rather than just finishing a lot of books for the sake of reading many books. Also, if you can hear any noise in the background, it's my dishwasher. I'm sorry for that. So let's just dive into the books I've read in winter. I will be going through the period of 20 December till I think it's like 20 March, somewhere between that period. So let's dive into the books I read this winter. So the first book I want to talk about is a book I do not have a physical copy of anymore because I really did not enjoy reading that book. It was A Heart for Christmas by Sophie Jomain. I'm not sure if I pronounce her name correctly, but it was like an advent calendar book. And I really like the concept of that. So the book was divided into 24 chapters and every chapter was sealed off. So you had to open one chapter every day and read it. And I really like the concept. It's just that it was more of a young adult book and I'm not really into young adult like the genre. And then I also did not really like the romance or the writing style. It just felt very childlike to me. And I did not enjoy the book. I do not remember much of it. It was about this girl who had a heart disease and she lives with her mother in France. And her mother is like overbearing because she is afraid of the heart condition, and the girl also had like a heart attack before she got a heart transplant. The mother was like very worried all the time about her well-being and she wasn't allowed to do many things because that would make her mother anxious. And then she spent, I think it was like winter break or something like that, she spent a few weeks, I think it was 2 weeks, she spent with her father who lives in this small village near a mountainside, I think. I'm not sure if I'm making that up, but it was like near the mountains because they were like also skiing a lot. And there she met this guy, her old neighbor, and they hit it off, obviously. And then he teaches her how to like enjoy living life again because she also gets scared easily, which is pretty understandable if you had like a heart attack and a heart transplant, but it just wasn't for me. So I rated that book 2 stars. I didn't hate it, but I also would not recommend the book. So that is usually when I give 2 stars. So 1 star is I actually really hated it, but that doesn't happen at all actually. So then 2 stars is I managed to get through the book, but I would never recommend it to anyone. And then 3 stars is it was okay, but I do not really think about it anymore. And then 4 stars is I love the book, I would recommend, I really enjoyed it. And then 5 stars is just perfect. Then the next book I read, I also do not have a physical copy of. That is, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but it's like manacled. I think it's pronounced manacled, manacled. I'm not sure, but it's by San Lin Yu. And it was actually, I read the fanfiction. It got published, I think, a few months ago. And the new title now is Alchemized. But I read the original fanfiction, which is a Harry Potter fanfiction. And it is about this alternate like universe where Harry Potter did not win the war and Voldemort did. And then he is like this new leader of the wizard world. And Harry Potter died with like almost everyone from the resistance except from Hermione. And then Hermione gets into this like breeding program. It's like Harry Potter, but also inspired by The Handmaid's Tale. So she gets into this breeding program and she is like sold to Draco Malfoy, and because he is like the High Reeve and like Voldemort's right hand man and his hitman and everything like that. So they want Hermione to like bring his heir into the world. And it's just, I rated this one 2 stars. It's like 1,000 pages and I read every single page. I was very, very impressed by like this whole world building and her writing style. And in that way, I would recommend the book. And maybe if Alchemist is very different, like plot wise, I would give it a chance because I really did like her writing style. The thing is, I hate abused being romanticized, and in this story, she has to be like the woman who carries the heir of Draco Malfoy, and that means he has to do things to her which she didn't want. And the whole writing style and concept of the story is very cool because at some point we have like these flashbacks into the past. I just don't like the fact that, I mean, at the end of the book, it was like everything was okay because she got her. I'm not sure if I'm spoiling it right now. Let me just say, at the end of the book, all was okay and forgiven. And I mean, that was how I perceived it. But I just don't like it when any form of abuse gets eventually like romanticized just because they end up in this relationship. I'm not really sure what to say more because I don't want to like spoil the story, and this is my own interpretation, and it's just the fact that I really do not like it when any form of abuse gets romanticized just because things are also happening to him, because I do maybe understand that he had no choice in the matter, but I would really rather it to be then a story about her being like the receiving end of the abuse and him like giving the abuse and not being like a fan of it, but he has to do it. And I would like it to be more focused on that and not just the fact that they are in love with each other and then end up together and all is well. That is the reason why I gave it 2 stars. I am not sure if Alchemist also has those specific topics, because I do know it was rewritten almost entirely because obviously she had to make this whole new magic system because she couldn't use the Harry Potter one. So I'm not sure if I want to read that, but any form of abuse, I just do not like that. Unless it's like really adding to the story of like trauma and overcoming the abuse and stuff like that. So that is why I gave it 2 stars. But I do want to say again that I really liked her writing style, and I think it was so cool and amazing how she spinned this whole world and also was inspired by The Handmaid's Tale. So that was very impressive. So then I read The 10-Year Affair. It is about Cora, and she has a family in a small town, and she just had a baby, and she goes to this baby group, and there she meets Sam, who is also a young father, and he is also attending the baby group with his baby, and they get like into this conversation and they have a chemistry, and then they continue going to the classes together and they develop this friendship. I thought the writing style and the concept of the book was so interesting because both are happily married, and at some point Cora develops stronger feelings for Sam than just friendship, and he cuts it off. He's like, I want to stay friends, but I do not feel more for you. And at that point, the story splits into 2 realities. So we continue following her like reality where she just stays married and he stays married, and they continue having this friendship and they continue going to the baby classes and just also sometimes meeting outside of those classes just because they have a friendship and everything is well. And then we follow this alternate reality where they get an affair. So the next 10 years we follow like Cora's perspective, and sometimes when she is like in her normal reality, she has this conversation with Sam, and then suddenly they are like kissing, and then as a reader you know like, oh, this is like one of those fantasy realities. And it was so interesting, and I think refreshing is a good word to use, because I have never read anything like this, and it was also not like, I'm not sure if I'm making it out to be like fantasy, but it wasn't like that. It was really just fiction, and I really, really enjoyed it. And she knows it is wrong, because I am not usually a fan of like affairs or anything like that. But she just knew it was wrong, but the fantasies kept coming. And I thought it was so interesting to just get into her head and follow these two realities of like the reality of what is happening, and then also the reality of like what could have been happening. So that was very, very interesting. I rated it 3.75 stars, just because sometimes it lacked that wow effect for me. But still sometimes think about the book, and I just thought it was very, very cool. Next, I read One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. This was just the book I needed to get out of my reading slump. It is a gothic fantasy book. So it is about a small town called Blunder, and this town is surrounded by a dangerous mist, and therefore it's like cut off from the rest of the world. And they believe, the townspeople, they believe that the mist is dangerous, and because it has this dark magic that makes you hallucinate, and usually when people end up in the mist they never come back. And many years ago there was this infection, and everyone who got like sick and infected developed these magical abilities. And because people thought it was scary and dangerous, everyone who gets infected needs to be like killed, or they want to get rid of them, so they send them into the mist. And then we follow Elspeth, who is a girl, and she was infected as a child, but her family kept this infection hidden, and they never saw any changes or like magical abilities, so they thought she was just infected but didn't develop anything. But nobody knows that she actually has this magical ability, but she just can keep it secret. And then one night she meets this highwayman, and he has also like these reasons and beliefs, and I really can't get into the plot without spoiling it, but just let me tell you that the whole magical setting of this book and this magical system is so interesting. So they also have like these cards, provenance cards, they are called, and those cards contain magic. And then it gets like this hunt of them trying to complete the whole deck, in order to be able to lift the mist that is surrounding the town. And the whole concept of this book, and also the writing style, I just like the writing style so much. Every chapter has this card in the beginning, which then has this old fairy tale rhyme style, which is so interesting, and it really adds up to the reading experience. And I just really loved it. So if you're into fantasy and you haven't read this book, I would always recommend this one, because it is so, so interesting. It is a duology, and I am so, so glad I finally picked it up, because it had been on my radar for such a long time, and now I am so happy to have finally picked it up. And it's just, like I said, the whole magic system and the characters and the writing style, and it's just so good, and everything is just so well thought of. And it's just, I could go on and on about this book, but I can't spoil anything, so I also can't say that much about the book, except that I really enjoyed it. Next, I read Pure Wit by Francesca Peacock, and it is a biography about the life of Margaret Cavendish. And she was such an interesting woman. She lived in 1600. I'm not sure again when she was born, but 1623. And she was a writer, in a time where it wasn't like usual for women to write, especially not under their own name. A lot of women used to write under their pen name, or they would publish it in the name of their husband, but not many women used to write under their own name. And she was just a badass woman. She wrote philosophy, she wrote fiction. She is believed to have written the very first science fiction novel ever, which is just so cool. And I loved the writing style of Francesca Peacock. I thought she was like such a great storyteller, because sometimes it could get a little bit dense or almost boring because it's also like a lot of history, but she had such an engaging way of writing. So I really did enjoy this book. So this is the book, and if you are interested in anything female writers related, I would definitely pick this one up because it's such an engaging read. And Margaret Cavendish was just this amazing woman. Then I read the second part of the Shepherd King duology. So this one is called Two Twisted Crowns, and it's everything I wanted a sequel to be. I cannot tell you much about the plot because it really is a continuation of the first book, and I would give like major spoilers if I dove into this plot. It was just so good, and I actually rated this one 5 stars, and I do not give 5 stars gently. So it's just, like I said, it's everything I want in a sequel and then more. And the whole, like, what I can tell you about the second book is that we get multiple point of views, which was so refreshing because every character we got like a point of view of was introduced in the first book. So it was very fun to also read the story from their perspective. And if I remember correctly, everything is like in the third perspective except from Elspeth's. So every chapter that is titled Elspeth is in her point of view, and then whenever it's like a different point of view, we get like this third perspective, and it's just so good. Again, I cannot tell you much more about the plot except that everything got tied up perfectly, and it was also just a very good ending of this story. And I didn't feel like it was a cliche or anything like that. There were actually more plot twists than in the first book, and it just worked out perfectly. So I rated this one 5 stars. Then I read I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy, and this one was so beautifully written. I didn't rate the book. I also didn't rate the biography of Margaret Cavendish because I usually do not like to rate biographies or memoirs or anything like that because it almost feels like I'm rating somebody's life. Whenever I do rate such a book, I usually rate it because of like the writing style, but usually I do not do that because it's just, like I said, it feels like I'm rating somebody's life story, and I don't really feel comfortable doing that. So I did not rate this book, but I would recommend it to anyone. Just before you start reading this, check out some trigger warnings because it was such a haunting story. For the people who don't know who Jeanette McCurdy is, she is a former actress, now an author, and she's like most famously known for her role as Sam Puckett in Nickelodeon's iCarly. I think the fact that she is an author now is such a fitting choice because her writing style, I haven't read her fiction debut, but I really want to pick it up because her writing style is so engaging and immersive, and it just really grabbed my attention and I couldn't put it down. And even like the most haunting scenes, she just worded it so perfectly. I cannot say much about it except that she is like writing about her life, her experiences as a child actor, and how her mother very much like impacted her life as a child but also as an actress, and just her whole experience with this world and also her relationship with her mother, which was also very touching. And like, I mean, like the title suggests, she didn't have like this best relationship with her mother. And the way she writes about this is just so, it's never accusing or anything. She just states her own perspective and her own experiences, but she never like points her finger to her mother and says like, you did this wrong, or you should have done this better, or anything like that. It's just very personal, and it was almost like I was reading her diary or anything. So yes, I would really recommend this one, especially if you're like new to the genre of memoirs. I think this was such a good book, and then especially like the writing style. It was fast-paced and just very good. So I would definitely recommend that one. But please, like I said, look up the trigger warnings before you read this book, because there are some heavy topics and also very heavy scenes. So it can be triggering for some people. So just look out for that. Then I read Crime and Punishment, which is a Russian literary classic by Dostoevsky. And I also rated this book 5 stars, which means I rated 2 books 5 stars in like last winter. And like I said, I do not really give 5 stars like that quickly, but these 2 books just were deserving of it. So Crime and Punishment is about this young law student who ends up killing a woman. He thinks this murder is justified by the fact that she was just a terrible person, and he thinks that because he kills her, he is like doing all the people around that woman a favor by killing her, because she can't terrorize them anymore. And then we get into this like psychological and philosophical spiral, and then like this question arises, like, can you really justify murder when you mean it well? And it's so interesting because it's 500 pages of his psychological downfall and his guilt, and just not only guilt but also like this cat and mouse game where he is afraid of getting caught. And it's just so interesting. The writing style is just amazing. If you are not that much into classics, I would still recommend this, because I've put this book off for so many years because I thought it was too intimidating, but it is so accessible. The writing style is beautiful and the sentences are so well thought of, but it was never like too difficult or anything like that. So yeah, I would really recommend this one. Then I read Practice Makes Perfect by Sarah Adams, which is the second book in the When in Rome series. I read When in Rome I think 2 years ago. And this book is set in the same small town. It's called Rome in Kentucky. And the first book was about pop star Amelia and then this baker, Noah. And they fell in love and they stayed in Rome. And then this book is about Annie, who is Noah's little sister. And she owns a flower shop in the same small town. And then it's about, what's his name? Will. And he is the bodyguard of Amelia. And because Amelia settled down in this small town, she didn't really need a bodyguard anymore. But now Noah and Amelia announced their wedding, and her agency thought it was better for her safety if Will came back to this town to like guard her. So he's back in town, and Annie always thought he was like attractive. Everyone in that world seems to think he is attractive because there are also like these BuzzFeed articles about this sexy bodyguard and things like that. So he is back into town, and she is someone who has like everything in control, and she has everything planned out, and she has her own flower shop, and she is just happy with life. The only thing she is missing is marriage, and she is also saving herself for marriage because she just wants this one right guy. And then one night she is talking to Amelia, and she is like, I wish someone would just come in and give me dating lessons and helps me find my dream husband, because Annie has social anxiety and her dates usually don't go that well because she messes it up or anything like that. So Amelia gets Will, her bodyguard, to help Annie, teaching her how to date and how to flirt and stuff like that. And then obviously feelings between Annie and Will start to get involved because, well, they are very, very attracted to each other. And it's just like nearing the end, so many things happened that frustrated me. I rated this book 2 stars. I did not like it at all. I felt the writing style was very just, they both, you get like it's dual point of view, and both felt so very pick me, and it was just frustrating me and irritating me, and I didn't like this book at all, especially because some things happened and I thought they were like the dumbest choices you could have come up with. So I would not recommend this book. I finished it and I was happy I finished it. So let's just stay with that. So then I read Addicted to You by Krista and Becca Ritchie, which is the first book in the Addicted series, which is a 10 book series, I think. Really enjoyed the book. I gave it 3.75 stars. I would really recommend it, and I really did enjoy it. It's just sometimes it felt like I was missing something, which is perfectly fine since it is like the first book in this series and it was obvious that it was like a setup for the rest of the series. So I really did enjoy it. I am very excited to continue this series. It is about Lily Calloway and her boyfriend Lauren Hill, and they have known each other since they were children, and both are struggling with addiction. And because they come from like this wealthy family and their appearance and everything is very, very important, they always felt the need to hide their addictions. So Lily is addicted to hookups and just bedroom stuff. And then Lauren is addicted to booze. So at some point, many years before this book is set, they came up with a plan where they would pretend and fake their relationship. So they have been pretending to be in a relationship for a few years just so they can live together and put up this like facade of that they are just both fine, and then they can help each other with their addictions and with hiding it from their respective families. And then this book is more about how they do have more feelings for each other, so it's not all fake. And I really thought, because it's very clear from like the blurb that they have more feelings for each other and they will not keep pretending that they are in a relationship. But I really thought it would be more like at the end of the book, and they already got together a few chapters in, which I personally liked more, I think, because they both thought that once they were like really together, it would get easier to get control over their addictions. But in fact, everything got like harder, and it got harder to maybe like accompany their addictions with actual feelings and looking out for each other. And they both wanted like the best for each other, but they were also like struggling with their own addictions. So it was interesting how this was written and just intertwined with each other. And it is obviously about addiction, so look up trigger warnings before you read this one. And just the whole story is so intriguing, and I really felt like this compassion with the characters, and they felt so real, and I was like rooting for them all the time, and then also sad whenever something happened, when one of them relapsed or anything like that. So the problems just felt so real. And I am, like I said, I'm really excited about continuing the rest of the series. So I gave this one 3.75 stars just because I was sometimes missing just that feeling. And like I said, I think it's perfect for a first book in a 10 book series, and it was really a good foundation for the series. And then lastly, I read Ready or Not by Cara Bastone. I also ended up rating this book 2 stars, which was such a disappointment because I really do want to read, what's it called? Promise Me Sunshine, I think. I've read nothing but positive reviews about that book, and it's supposed to be this great story about grief and love and everything like that. So I really still am excited about that book. This book, not so much. I really did not like this book. I felt the writing style was very just ick-inducing, and it was like I was following this 16-year-old even though she was in her 30s, I believe. So yeah, it's about this woman called Eve, and Eve has like everything planned out, and then at one point she has a one-night stand and she ends up pregnant. And that is like the first chapter of this book, is that she gets like confirmation from the doctor that she is in fact pregnant. And it's just so dull almost, because Eve does not have any feelings at all, and she doesn't express any feelings, and it's just, she is so flat. She doesn't have like any feelings about suddenly being pregnant and actually choosing to like continue this pregnancy, which means giving birth to like an actual person. And we never, even though everything is from her point of view, we never get any emotions or just thoughts about her life, and maybe like anxieties about suddenly being pregnant. And it's just, everything felt so flat and it was not interesting at all. And then everything she like did say or feel felt so icky, and this whole writing style was just not for me. So I gave it 2 stars, and I was very disappointed because I really thought it would be a fun book to read. But I still want to give Promise Me Sunshine a chance, just because I am really interested in the story. I just hope that the writing style got improved. So these were the books I read this winter. I am very, very excited about the upcoming books I'm going to read. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you read any of these books, I would really love to hear your thoughts about them, or if you've read any other interesting or fun books in the last few months, just let me know in the comments and maybe I can check those out also. So yeah, I'll see you guys soon. Bye!